Cleeve School is an 11 to 18 comprehensive in Gloucestershire. The class is a fourth-year group of 30 pupils working on a coursework item for GCSE Geography with Derek Plumb, the head of department. Fieldwork data was collected from 3 parts of Cheltenham's central area. The data was entered into the programme in form, and the class are now at the stage of data analysis. Each pupil must select 2 hypotheses and used fieldwork evidence to accept, reject, or modify the ideas put forward. The Geography department has its own computer, but for this lesson, Derek has borrowed a second micro from the Computer Studies room. A PGCE student teacher is observing the lesson and helping some of the groups with their work. Derek introduces the lesson by reminding pupils of the task that they have been set.
So I think perhaps the starting point ought to be, if we could, just look at the hypotheses we're all working on, because by now, if you haven't chosen your 4, or your 2 rather, then the processing's somewhat meaningless, all right? Right, well the first thing to bear in mind is that when you've chosen your 2, you've got to get the right data to match up to them. So you should be drawing the maps which are relevant to that. You've got to be getting the data which is relevant to that. But the one thing that you can use to build up on what you've been doing, and I know some people have started already, is to use the computer to ask more than one question. So if I were to say, for example, and this seems just a reasonable question to me, if you take this as an idea, and I said this, why might this be a reasonable assumption that if I look at area 1, it's going to have more high-order functions than low-order? Why might that be a reasonable assumption? Caroline?
Because the high-order functions usually make a lot of money, so they can afford the rent, so it's a big rent field.
Right, so it's a reasonable assumption. What would you expect, therefore, in area 2? Christina, I mean, if I were to now transfer that idea to area 2, what would you expect?
Lower roads because they can't afford it as much.
Okay, so it's a reasonable assumption. So we'll try that, shall we? Who can tell me? What do I have to press first, by the way? Find, okay. Help me out, because I'm feeling nervous. So what do I need to find? Area, all right. Area. Well, first of all, which area are we looking for? Okay, so we'll say equal to 1. Now, if our idea is correct, what will we expect to find that graph looking like?
Lots of level 1, a few level 2, and so many level 3.
Well, which way round is it? Is level 1 low order or what?
Level 1 is... No, 3 is high order.
Right, so we expect to find more level 3, all right? Right, now if we just look at the screen for a minute, I think we could establish that in area 1 there appears to be a higher number of level 3 functions. So if we did the same thing now for area 2, we'd expect to find perhaps a smaller proportion? We'll just do that, and then I'm going to stop talking, and you can get on with your work, and then we'll be able to identify different questions that I know some of you already got to ask about different parts of the town, so that you can actually get on and do that. But just to compare it, I mean, if I move that to the, say, right, and draw the table, if anyone would like to jot down those figures, it might not be a bad idea. For number 1, we've got 4, and level 2 functions, middle order 26, and so on. Can anyone give me a possible solution to that? Why in area 2 might there be no low order? Caroline?
Because they're not in the centre where they can have passing trade from the big stores, but they're not quite in the residential areas either, where they've got the market from the residential areas, so
okay.
They're sort of in the middle.
I think that's good thinking. I mean, you might start off by assuming that a level 1 function could afford the cheaper land value, which might be true, but on the other hand, if it's further from the centre, it's not going to get the passing trade. So it's that kind of idea that you've got to be looking at and thinking about. And this is the only way you're going to be able to do it. If you're ploughing through all of your tables and all of your maps, you're not going to get the same kinds of answers coming up, all right? So what I would like you to do now is to get on with your processing in whatever way you want, but where there are specific questions, then I think we can start to put them together. And I think, Vicky, you've got 1 or 2 you want to sort out first, okay? Toby, where are you? Do you think you could help Vicky over there, if I come over with you and we can... And what else then?
And north.
And street then, S-T-R-T, does D, does not contain north.
Do I put the whole thing in?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Now that's it then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now do you want a graph now, or you want the table, don't you? So again, you go back to user, and you say user group. Oh no, it won't take very long. Look, right. So there's your table.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, that's the same.
Okay. Well, that's fine. That's your level. That's okay then.
Yeah.
Where is it the same?
Yeah.
Inside area 1, and it doesn't include those streets,
Yeah.
which implies that that's the number that you're looking for in the side streets. So you're obviously comparing the side streets with the main street. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good thinking.
What that happened when you were
No order at all. Take the expected thing down.
Yeah, I'll be right with you. Can I just interrupt you all for 1 second, please? Because if most of you can see the screen here, that's quite an interesting example of how you can use this program to pick out lots and lots of information about different parts of the town. So here's an example. They've asked it to find in Area 1 streets. Thanks a lot.
You always liked it up before you say.
Okay, that's interesting. You've got almost a 50-50 split. But if you want to get rid of that stuff, let's say you just press right, then press pi, and then it's there, okay? And if you wanted to remove the other stuff and say just so it looks like as a bar chart, then you can see it. But the important thing is you've got the information. I don't know whether or not that is going to be... Yeah, that's quite useful. If you use that, and use that as your central point, that's the only 2 lines you need. You can enjoy your circle around it, save you a bit of time, won't it? Okay?
Can you see that?
All right, what I was trying to point out earlier, this is where it can be really very helpful. If I said to you now, will you go away and count up the number of different orders or functions or renewal for about 8 different streets, but eliminate 3 of them, you could do it, but it would take possibly the whole of the morning to do. Whereas if I say now, look, find Area 1, and then let's eliminate some streets from Area 1, and we're eliminating what appear to be the main streets, the High Street, for example, Clarence Street and North Street. And notice you don't have to type in Clarence, you can type in Clare, and that'll pick it up if I've made a spelling mistake or problem. So what we're doing now is eliminating the main roads and asking questions just about the side streets inside Area 1. So it's really quite a detailed thing to do. I don't know whether I'm allowed to interrupt, but are you getting from it what you want?
Yeah, but you need a printer, so
You need a printer. Well, in that case, you can either come in at break or you can come in at lunchtime, or we're going to be, well, we've got a fair amount of time left, so when they've printed that out and Sarah's done her bit, if it's time, well, if you're looking for lots of detailed information, obviously you need the printer. All right? And perhaps, do you need the printer, Sarah, or not? You do. Right. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute then, but if there's anything else you can get out of it, get it done while you can. I mean, using user group will bring out the groups of any of those sets of data you've got. All right?
No, just to remember the title.
Okay, so let's see the results here then. Okay. So we're coming back to having... could you explain that, do you think, Laura? I mean, any ideas why all of a sudden we're back to having 4 level 1 functions there?
Because the housing estates need high order grocery stores and things like that.
Low order, you mean?
Low order.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, again, it's true. You're moving into a bigger residential area. Good. Okay. So have you finished with that now? I mean, have you got what you want from it, or are there any other particular things? You want a pie chart, right? So right and then pie. Right. Well, press that top button there.
Yeah.
All right. Now, area equals 1. Now then, do you want to print that lot?
Yeah.
And you told it to go across the screen or not?
Yeah.
So
Go.
Go. 0, 2, 2, 7, 2. Okay. It's just that when the 3 lights aren't on there, then it means the printer's not on, and therefore it won't do what it's meant to do. Okay?
For each area, because I want to see the number extensive on main and side roads for hypothesis 2.
Right. Okay, that's good.
I've done a map of the renewal. I've done a map of the function code, a map of the levels.
Right.
And I've got a map of the number of stories.
All right.
So what else do I need?
That's more than enough. I think if you go beyond that now, really all you've got to do is to use your data and information from that. So the number of graphs that you want to use to illustrate those points is now the critical thing. All right. So I honestly don't think you ought to do any more mapping, but rather, I mean, there are simple ways around that. For example, I've got a blank bit of paper there. Week's extension. Yes.
They wanted to find out the legal bits and pieces, banks, solicitors, estate agents.
Function well, it's because you've asked it to. You've asked one function to contain a bank, a solicitor, and an estate agent. I mean, one of those functions can be. It can only be one of those things, can't it? So you have to find banks, then you find functions, estate agents. Right? Okay. Well, the final question, please, before they get cracking here, is there anybody now, because you can come back, you can use the computer break time, stay in, you come back lunchtime and after school, and it's available tomorrow lunchtime and tomorrow after school. But are there any specific questions anyone's got? Does anyone want to know something now, like where are the estate agents, where...
These students have already had some computer experience during previous IT lessons. 3 standalone BBC computers with individual printers have been borrowed from the IT and geography departments. Students must undertake a data handling and decision-making exercise involving the development of a new housing estate alongside an established village community.
Below Cynthia and Adrian, you have Miss Priscilla Bloomsbury. Now, Miss Priscilla Bloomsbury, she's a semi-retired librarian who works part-time for Humberside City Council on its mobile library service. Now, their 2 opinions are very different indeed. You have to make your own minds up.
The students are required to assess census data, a selection of public opinions, and the roles various individuals play in the existing community in order to produce a report using front page extra.
It's not as though it's been saved from the jaws of death, is it? Or anything like that. What the hell? What do we do for now anyway? Right. What about we put in, let's see, as a first paragraph, it's got to be hard hitting, hasn't it? It's got to explain what's happening. Yeah. It's got to explain the whole thing.
Because that house is going to be built, it's going to destroy someone, and
So destroy it.
No, don't write it.
Yesterday, Wimpy made bid for
Mr. Fields Land.
not Mr. Fields, no. Made bid for open land in Newbold. Hoping for the prospect of hoping for the prospect of building a new
Building a new...
I can't think of the name. Oh, no. Building a new... What are they called? Oh, no.
Building a new village, building new houses.
Oh,
Building a large... yeah, I know what it is. Building a new site.
No. Oh, yes. Estate. Oh, estate. Think of the name.
So, why are you saying that's not a growing population?
Because there's the same amount of youngsters as there is old people.
Fine, in fact, if you look at the bottom column, there's less in what age group?
Not to 9.
Not to 9, fine, well that's a great standpoint, isn't it, for the argument for the building of the Wimpy homes, because what type of people will you get? Young people with prospects, what are they going to bring to college?
Children.
Children.
Write this down. Just hold on, what about a couple of the villagers commented on that?
No, this is just an opening paragraph. It's setting the scene like... Yeah. So we can include that afterwards. It's just explaining the situation sort of thing. What? Say that again.
Feel a local farmer.
A local farmer, not the local farmer.
He is local.
A local farmer. There's pressure on him, so that means his land is like a prime area. Yeah, I get you. Should we have that as page 1? It's factors affecting that field village.
We'll tell you what.
You put someone first of what all the controversy is about, and then you put some art. You know what you put what the argument
About these ideas on this paper.
We can use them.
Just mix them all up and put them into our own words, into sentences.
People are moving quietness really looking at this, aren't they? They're a nice house, they're working.
And it's dead quiet and peaceful, but
it's not going to be quite no more, is it?
That's recent housing estates though, that's going to be more accessibility.
and plus if they're going to build all the houses, they're going to have to build roads, aren't they? There's going to be heavy transport and
that'll create more
lots of noise and traffic will be more dense and that.
Home village. His home village.
Yeah,
if he doesn't sell any of his land,
his family's future.
his family's future.
The female population. It was about oh, anyway. Go on, Cleeve. Did I put that right?
Yes.
Go on, more roads.
No, you missed the D out.
Yeah, I think. She's not. She must include more printing that ready. Should I do
Doing that.
name on
A network of BBC computers is used to run the holiday simulation. A preliminary lesson has already introduced the students to the basic principles of the software.
Right, read the instructions. It explains exactly what you're going to be doing. It's a decision-making exercise. You are taking on the role of planners of Holiday Island. You are working in league with the government to try and produce the best sites for tourism on this island. Now, you've done quite a lot of background about tourism, so you've even planned your own holidays. So you should be by now able to think in terms of tourism, the jargon to do with holiday brochures and so on, and we'll explain how that will link up with your geography lessons later on. Now, to look at the island, do you think the best development for that island would be a beach holiday? Remember, from the background information, they haven't got much there at the moment, so they're going new into the market. So you've got 3 different types. I mean, beach might be what you'd go for, but is it best for the island? Remember, you're not thinking about you going on holiday, you live there. What has your island got that is going to attract tourists? If it's the nice beaches, fine. But before you jump in with beach, just think about it. Don't forget, you've also got to think about access to it, how people are going to get there. So you still want to go for a beach, do you?
No.
It's up to you. It's your decision. The wildlife. Right, so if you've made your decision, the first thing you can do on the box, tick the wildlife. Now look at the map again. Right, think about wildlife, scenery and wildlife, isn't it? So scenery can be anything, can't it? From the mountains to the coastal scenery, and don't forget the 2 reserves that you've got. So just start thinking about that in terms of that's what people are coming to see. Yeah. So you're on to the weightings, aren't you? Yeah. Do you understand what they mean? You're happy with those, aren't you? If you look at the map while you're doing them, I think you might find it helps. So you can have plus and minus figures. Right, that's on there. So whatever you decide, it's a plus or a minus figure. Don't just put the figure in, right, just put plus or minus as well.
You have to put the plus. Can't you just leave it?
The plus you can leave, but the minus you have to put in. Yeah.
And write down why. It's because it's on a sandy beach and it's near. It's not by.
Sandy beach. And it's not too near. Oh, but look, it's not near.
Not
It's
nice
exactly in a settlement.
Sandy beach.
Less rainfall. Yeah. It's near a settlement. It's number 19. Number 20. Not too far away from
And it's good. It's near the coast.
And it's got road access. Look.
Is it mountainous? Oh, wait a minute, what does this mean?
Farming area.
But where's the rocky coast? Oh, that's the problem. There's a rocky coast. And
but like there's no sandy beach near the rocky coast, so it's not worth it,
I
is
think
it?
that's
We
what
want a
it's
sandy
saying.
beach holiday.
And it's near an industry mining area.
What?
No, but that,
really
when you
near.
look at it, that is 100 kilometres.
So that's quite a lot away from it.
It's just like spread along the beach.
Good idea. The sort of midway along, isn't it?
So like, people can go on the beach, they can go that end or that end, they don't have to walk all the way up there.
Fine. What type of accommodation have you got? So how much space are you going to be likely to need for that compared with the other types?
We need quite a lot of space because we want really quite a bit of ground in between.
How much do you think that you're likely to spend on advertising, do you think?
To start off with, you'd have to spend quite a lot because...
Yeah, we want to get known.
Yes, you're new. Your problem is that nobody's heard of you.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you've probably got to spend more this year.
Than you would next year.
Right. Luxury, was it? Now, don't tell me about 50 employees for each one. Very nice. Oh, luxurious package. Do you not think you might hit 1 or 2 problems with that? Just a few. Had a rethink, have we? Good. So what have you come up with now?
Nothing.
Nobody? You're a dead loss.
No, more than
How can you work out? What have you got to help you?
and a graph.
And a graph. Right. What does a graph tell you?
How many people are expected to do?
Just I don't see 4 on there, to be honest.
Just I thought the number of tourist places for tourists to go and see.
Yeah. I believe you.
You're going to have to hang on a second. It's crashing because you've got just you.
Mike Penny is leading a field study for a party of 25 A-level students and teachers from 3 schools. The aim of the fieldwork is to predict the amount of rainfall required to flood a local river. Several items of software are used on the centre's 480Z and Nimbus microcomputers during the day's exercise. Here we see Mike introducing the day's activity.
We know how much extra capacity the river can take. We'll stick it into the formula, do the sums, and we'll have an answer. It'll turn out as a prediction of how much rain will fall to fill the river from where it is now up to the top of the banks. So when you're paddling around this afternoon wondering, why am I collecting all this ridiculous data? That's what it's for. Very, very important that I've talked about accuracy. There's something like £3,000 worth of equipment coming out with us. If you collect data badly, you'll get bad data. If you put bad data into a formula which has got square roots and powers in it and then little ends in it and multiply it all together, it'll become absolute rubbish. And if you give it to a computer to do and with a few more figures and times that all together, you get ultimate rubbish.
Fingers, no, not ready yet. Hang on, no, because I need to see. All right. That's your pen, yeah.
During the fieldwork, students explore the characteristics of the drainage basin. Here they are measuring the infiltration rate, and the data they collect will later be analysed with the help of the computer. After lunch, they will estimate the river discharge from measurements of the river's flow rate, width, depth and bankful capacity.
This thing here is the key to getting everything organised for tonight, because it will be the point at which we can make some conclusions, all right? And in the next half hour, 45 minutes, or however long you want to spend on it, and then from 7 o'clock until about 7:45, our prime function in life is to get this table filled in with data, okay? Now at the moment, your data will be in some state of chaos.
4.
4.
Naught.
0, return.
4. No, sorry, naught.
0, return.
And 4.
4.
Naught. 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 6. And then return.
Return, try.
Was it enter?
Return, yeah. Right, how are we doing? No questions, sorry. Right, introduce. Correct. Peaceful. Aha!
That's the best to work out.
Well, you have one over the
What? Well, that's like that to work out.
You've got to do the other one.
I was wrong with both the other
Look doing that.
No, I wouldn't. I want to see if we can try and get this printed.
Once you go down really far and then come up and then
Oh my god.
Doesn't look right how the river did, does it? It does.
Why don't you go water level?
Not really.
It wasn't level, no, it wasn't lower.
How exactly do you get water like that?
Exactly.
There's a bucket there, you can see.
Oh, there could have been a boulder down here. And
Yeah, there was a tree there or something like that.
Maybe water was sticking out the wall.
God.
It was like that. There was a massive hole. Believe me.
Yes, well,
It didn't look like that, did it?
He won't finish now because he won't get water.
I can officially say I had nothing to do with that. I was sitting on the bank.
now print it. Do that.
Everyone's got the same thing.
Do that thing to print it, sir.
Right. Create a new file. Call it something 5.
What are you going to put in the file?
Eh?
You're going to put in the file.
You're going to do another one, aren't you?
Oh my God, we've got the other one to do. Oh.
Otherwise, you've got for garters, Aaron. You'll be strung up.
No, maybe the other group did the other one. Let me go and ask them.
Yeah, check them out.
What happens now is quite important because we're going to interpret the results and then make some conclusions. Take rough notes or whatever, or jot them on your note sheet as I go through them. It is quite important because, you know, the computer takes away the thinking bits and people stop thinking. Mind you, it also takes away the drudgery. Let me announce that without the computer, you'd be doing this at about 3 in the morning. Still adding up, getting everything wrong, redoing it. And we're here at 7 o'clock. You did very well in that break period up to 6 o'clock because you've all worked well and got the results done, and they're quite good. So let's just go through the results now and interpret, yeah? So we can now say, aha, if the weather forecast is predicting a rainfall figure of 19.58, that's less than an inch of rain in the next 24 hours, we will be able to go back there and see a flood occur. Now we need to know, of course, how many times it's rained at that sort of magnitude in this area over the last number of years, and then correlate that with the number of times it's flooded. Okay, now in order to do that we need to interrogate some data. We need our weather records. So we've got weather records stored on computer since 1983. So plenty of bits of information. If you just turn your eyes to that, we're going to do that. We're going to find out how many times it rained greater than that. I've already sorted the data. There's the data, 84, 86, 87, 83, da 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 da. But I've already sorted them into a file called high rain. I've merged them. So we're going to have a look at the high rain. Load all the records in. And we want to search the data. Which field do you want to search? You want to search rainfall. You want to find out if rainfall is greater than 19.58. Right. Is this correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay, 50 times out of the 74 records of high rainfall, that has been achieved in the last 4 years, 5 years. But the graph is tremendous. Look, the graph is telling you exactly what the theory says it should do. It's saying that it should start quickly, and then it should decline to a relatively constant rate, apart from that one residual. And here's our graph. The first thing to say is, gosh, it didn't work, did it? Computers have their faults when they draw graphs. You have to scale them automatically. If a human were to graph this data, you wouldn't have done it like this. You would have fiddled it so it looked a bit better. In fact, it's not actually all that bad, because at least they start fast and go slower. If you take out some of these residuals, like those and those, look how close to the line it comes. So you've now, we have in 24 hours done what the Americans use thousands and thousands of pounds worth of clever little instruments for, because you actually do it with relatively local field work, knowing your catchment. And that's what Logan Jack does. It's 7:45. That's amazing.
This is a fourth-year group of 25 pupils of mixed ability. They are working with the programme Mamsia, a game park for East Africa. There is one BBC computer in the corner of the classroom, and pupils are working in role to decide whether to choose game park A or B and how it will be managed. The groups are taking the roles of nomads, subsistence farmers, government officials, businessmen and shopkeepers, conservationists, tour operators and big game hunters.
For the purposes of this morning, you have to make one or two assumptions. That we have already decided that Mamsia is going to have a game park. You have already had the opportunity to discuss that, to talk about it in your various groups, and to make the decision that Mamsia is going to have a game park. The activities that we're going to do this morning are related to how that game park is going to be managed and where it's going to be. The important things I'd like you to remind you about are that you can negotiate with groups as you wish. Remember where you discovered at the end, and I told you last lesson, that some groups have much more power than others. And it says, of course, you may like to combine parts of Scheme 1 and parts of Scheme 2 to create your own management scheme. You may have a chance to do this individually if we don't do it in groups today. Right, here we have the first group, which are the nomads. Samantha, Emma and Kelly, the nomads. Now you'll have to decide, the game park will have a definite effect upon your life. Bearing in mind, as nomads, you just move around at will, moving your animals and so forth wherever you want. If somebody suddenly starts putting up boundaries and barriers, then that's going to affect your lives very greatly. So you will need to organise yourselves into a campaign to protect your own interests so that you can survive. All right? Just to remind you that the artifacts you see at the back are all things which have been confiscated from people trying to import them into this country because they're from protected species or endangered species. Apart from the stuffed birds, which are rather fragile, you can take any of those artifacts down to have a look at, and they may help you support your case. The books and things in the front are obviously here for you to use as well. All right? The time is now 1:15. At 12 o'clock we will stop and have a report back from each group as to what game park they want, reminder, what game park you want and how you see it being managed. Are there any questions? No? Right, off you go then.
So we can't really plan where we're going to go now. So what we're saying is then the nomads, we'll do back there again. We're going to help them outside. We have to support them.
Can we negotiate the thing about the nomads now, please?
Yeah, okay, what do you want?
Well, we received a bribe from them actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I tell you what.
Yeah, they tried to bribe us to stay out.
For you to stay out?
Yeah, and they
threatened us with loads of violence. Well, you're going to be shooting all of their animals, aren't you?
Yeah, I know, but I want to see...
So are you going to take the bribe?
No, I want to see what things action
we're going to take. What we're doing, we're helping them.
So you, as shopkeepers, you may, it depends really where the tour operators are going to set up their hotels, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where you would necessarily like to put your gift shops and things. I mean, if it's going to be right by the lake, that might be a good area. But if they're going to have their hotels outside the game park, or if you choose to have your shops here and they're having that game park, it might be very difficult. So you need to negotiate with them, bearing in mind these are existing settlements. Okay? Those other things may have an influence on that. The development scheme might. So you could have a look at 2.
They're not going to be living on. They're not going to be living on game park A. It's not, because we find that food. But Jay? Yeah. Which bit are you having A or B? No mads, we want to go to A. We have B, we've got B to it. Right. So the nomads, because the land's poor in A, the nomads, you know, they want to farm there in UK, so they've agreed that they won't be able to live out A, but they can have the rest of the land outside in UK. So. We don't know if we want A or B now, do we? Well, we're not entirely sure yet, but we think we want A, partly because the nomads and the things are now satisfied with what we've chosen. So it would, you know, they would agree to what we wanted. Yeah, okay. Should we go for A? Yeah,
Okay, so you can see that that area again is quite good, isn't it? So it's really up to you to make the decision, because you've got quite good bits of information about both areas, but you have to negotiate with the people involved. Okay?
Trying to find out what one this one is.
Okay. Right. Tour operators then. Tell me where you've got to and how you're getting on, what decisions you've made so far.
Well, we got an agreement with the businessmen and the big game houses for side B, because it's big, it's got more settlements for us to show, and we was in an agreement with the farmers, but that was for site A, and we was going to buy them out, but we would give them new housing and work. But it seems that we want site B now. I don't think they're in agreement with us.
Government officials are patronising us, actually.
No, I don't.
They have got a large vote, and that would help.
We have got a large vote. And so it would be best
together well.
And we've got the tour operators, and they've got the third largest vote.
Yeah, but they are the actual country leaders, aren't they? I mean,
yeah, well, that's going to be nothing. But what are we going to do about the nomads? We've got to do something about the nomads.
we don't move them into new land.
Well, nomads, they haven't got no choice if we just get everyone asking, because they have no right to the land. They just have no right to the land. They just wander from place to place.
It's true.
Are you really prepared to do that? Yes, we are. We wouldn't say it in this word. Ben, do you want to work with us? Say yes. Yeah, but it don't work because all the money that comes from your shop, the tax that comes from your shop, goes to you. No, it doesn't, because that's what we decided. It's all going for you lot. So you ain't going to make money, can you? You do better than that. You're going to do big. You have a steady income every week. No, and then you can say that. You can buy it. You can buy it. In your shops, right, you can buy local crops. You say they can do that. We import like you. Yeah, well, then who? What tourists want to buy imported crops that come from where they come from? No, but you actually pay your money. Yeah, but you're not voting. No, Jasper, wrong one. You want A.
Should we choose B? Because they're
No, yes, we're already in the neutral. No, all they give is neutral now. Look, you don't have a steady income every week, do you? All they managed so far without you. Can it be a mismatch? It can be. Your crops fail sometimes, and I mean, if you've got a steady job, your families will get paid. Then every week.
I think we should choose B.
They've managed quite so far. No, they haven't. Have you finished work? Well done. Gabby.
Right, we're choosing B.
Thank you. But it's good. Give us B.
Can I have quiet, please? Right. We come to the summing up bit now, the bit where you're all going to have a report back. I'd like a representative, please, from each group to come and sit in one of the chairs in the front here. Bring your label with you, please.
Excuse me, miss.
Okay. Right, let's hear from the subsistence farmers there,
Well,
Vincent.
If we was to choose boundary B, they would offer to buy our crops off us and employ us, and the tourist offers to to use us in part of their programme, but the land is poorer. Well, us subsistence farmers want to carry on the heritage that our fathers carried on, so we'll be choosing A, which land is much more richer. Okay.
Okay, fine. Who did you negotiate with?
Almost everybody except for the nomads.
Except for the nomads. You didn't get a chance to talk to them?
No.
Did you find the government officials helpful?
No.
No?
No, it's an argument.
There was an argument between you and the government officials?
No, between the government officials and the businessmen. I was in the middle of it.
I see. Okay, thank you. Right, I don't want to go through the process of the vote today. I think that you've all formulated your opinions very well and come up with some very interesting negotiating processes one with another. I think perhaps you've learned that it's not always easy to get people round to your point of view, and perhaps that will give you some insight into what goes on before such things as game parks and channel tunnels and all sorts of things get built.
So can you just tell us a bit about how much preparation the pupils had before this lesson? What have they been doing in the run-up?
Ah, yes. Well, what you actually see today in the classroom is a condensing really of several of the activities that we've had, because apart from the computer programme, we've had a special collection of books from the library service. We also had a visit from and a talk from the Paynton Zoological Society and some information from them on their endangered species booklet, and all of the artifacts around have come from them. So they've had a talk from the zoo about conservation and zoos versus game parks, or zoos and game parks. We've run through the ideas of where game parks might be situated and why. We've actually looked at the effect upon the effect of man upon the environment in terms of sort of the loss of animals' environments, people's environments, so forth. Before this particular session today, we've already used the computer to decide whether or not the government, whether or not the country of Mamsier should have a game park. And we've looked at, they made the decision in the previous sessions that they should have a game park, using the same roles. And now coming today, they were looking at which site they should use and why.
You've only got one computer in the room. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you manage getting all the pupils to the computer and whether you have to sort of organise it?
Well, I always view a computer as being an additional resource, not the be-all and end-all of something. In fact, a lot of the programs you could use the information without necessarily using a computer. I think you've got to have lots of other resources available, like the books, like the artifacts and so forth. I suppose I always set out at the beginning of a session when we're going to use the computer by pointing out that there is only one computer, and it's no good all of them sitting there waiting to use it and doing nothing, because they won't get the work done, and they will all eventually get their go. And by judicious oversight, you can actually make sure that they do all get their go. And actually I found that by the fourth year, if they've used computers in second, third year, they're quite used to the fact that they'll have to wait for their go, and organise themselves quite well into a rota, if you like, to get on it. I'm after you, so to speak. It is only an additional resource, except that I think it does have a certain undefinable quality or value, which I still haven't been able to define adequately. I think it's to do with the fact that they are in control of their own decision making about what they put in and how they use what comes out. And I think that's possibly it, but I'm not sure. But it does have a quality. Once you say you're using the computer, the focus of and the attitude is different, and I don't know why, but it is. They enjoy this kind of activity very much. I think they get a lot out of it. I sometimes wonder whether or not they're ever capable of taking on the ideas they have talked about. I always wish they could take on their ideas that they've talked about so well into their assignments. They have to do an assignment for recreation and conservation, and it would be very good if they could take this particular activity on into an assignment. But I quite often find that the assignment is never to the same quality as the actual work or the actual input into the sessions. And that seems to be that once they're presented with paper and pencil or tape recorder or collage or whatever, it's back to the real work as they see it, and this isn't work, whereas in fact it is work, but they don't see it as that. My philosophy just is that you always have to have lots of resources to do these things, otherwise you end up with a chaos. And they must be organised. I mean, you know, sort of the group labels, the names in the computer, all that sort of thing has got to be done beforehand, which is the pressure on the teacher. Once the lesson's rolling, it's not really so much pressure, but you've got to be organised first.
At Cleeve School in Cheltenham, both GCSE and A-level students have used computer analysis within their individual studies. Here, 4 students explain how the computer has helped them. In each case, the students used the data handling programs Quest and Inform to analyse data from very different sources, including 19th century census returns, questionnaires and police accident records.
My individual study was to assess the degree of mobility within Bishop's Cleeve during the 19th century, taking the information from 1841, 51 and 81 censuses.
Well, it's analysis of how 3 villages of Dearest, Trennington, Woolstone in Gloucestershire changed socially and economically between 1841 and 1987, with the emphasis on seeing whether each village has a different rate of gentrification in it, and has this rate of gentrification affected the consequent changes in each village.
What I actually was doing was finding out what factors explain the geography of the tithe map area in 1841.
Well, my study was to find the distribution and pattern of accidents throughout the Woodmancote area.
One of the early problems that can be faced by students is the availability of data. Was this a problem for these students?
So what I had to do is get the census material for Woolstone and Trennington from the records office just by photocopying it. I had the 3 census returns for 1981 for each village, but they were included in a part area, so that had to be scaled down. Mrs. Plumb got those, and I did a personal mobility survey. It's one of those.
The data came from the Shire Hall. Was it in the form that you wanted? Did you have to...
Yeah, it was virtually, I could put it straight onto the computer, because it was straight off their computer. And I just had to make up a key for rain, say, is equal to 3 in the key.
So you got a printout from their computer?
It's about that thick.
Once the data is available, how is data entry into the computer organised?
The 1841 censuses were quite reasonable to read. It was just the time I had to spend going around collecting all the questionnaires, which was the thing. But once you got those, you know, it took about a minute every questionnaire. It's quite fast, because all you were doing was just tapping in numbers corresponding to each question.
I believe Mr. Plumb actually wrote it all in. So, I mean, he must have spent quite a time doing that.
Using a computer for examination work means that individuals need access to computers during their own time. How is this arranged?
The computer, we had access to it at school from the geography department's computer. The study was run in conjunction with the department, obviously, and they gave us access to the computer when we needed it.
So you had preference over other people?
Yes, we did. We had preference over other people most of the time. With 3 lessons during a week, 9 times out of 10 we were able just to go up, set the computer up and get on with the work.
Well, I came up for lunch times and a couple of times after school.
Well, I had my own computer, which is a BBC Model B.
Computers should give the opportunity for 5th and 6th form students to analyse their data more effectively. How did these students use this opportunity?
Well, this is the age sex pyramid for 1851, 743 people. We entered all the ages and the sex, obviously, and this computer program shows the end result, the age sex pyramid that comes up. The computer itself has drawn it.
So what we did then was there was a printout of something like that, which ended up like that. And then, because I had 3 separate questionnaires, you could get another graph like that up for the same for Trainington and Woolstone. So I had 3 printed out pyramids, and I photocopied them down, scaled them down, and cut them out. So on one piece of A4 you had 3 small pie charts, and so you could get a clear comparison. And you could do that with the rest of the fields that were there, from why they lived in the county, how long they'd lived there, why they lived there, what job they did, how old they were, loads of things.
Once all the background work had been done, and the graphs and trends and charts had been plotted and drawn and obtained from the information on the computer, then it's a question of interpreting this and writing up the final report to tie in all the graphs and all the information that was shown.
Well, once it was in, I decided to write some hypotheses to test out, and I got them up, and then I had to decide what type of questions to ask the computer.
So give me an example of the sort of hypotheses that you...
Right, well, one of my hypotheses was accidents are more frequent in poor visibility at night and on poor road surface conditions, such as wet or icy roads.
So how did you test that?
Well, I can go to the computer and I can, if I type in find weather equal to 3 up there, then the computer will search for all the accidents that occurred in rainy conditions. And if I type go in, it's now searching. And then it brings up all the accidents that happened and people involved.
And what did you do with that information?
Well, I took all the information, I got it into percentage form so that I could then plot it on a graph. And I drew the graph myself because I don't have a right kind of printer to print out graphs.
Did this require much previous knowledge on the part of the students in both use of hardware and data handling software?
Well, before I started this project, really I didn't know anything about computer. I hadn't seriously used a computer.
Had you used the program before?
No, never.
You hadn't?
So it's the first time, and it was very easy to use.
The fundamental question for all students must be, why bother to use the computer? Could their study have been undertaken without the computer?
Well, to use the computer, without the computer I wouldn't have been able to do the project because there was a vast amount of information to be used. And without processing this on the computer, I wouldn't have been able to have done it. There's 743 people from 1851, and to go through them, construct age sex pyramids, its graphs on occupations, etc., would have been impossible on my own, because there's also 2 other years of course I'd have had to do as well.
We had a problem with the examiner at the beginning because I was only going to do 2 villages, and that was Trainington and Deerhurst. But they were too similar, I think, and he didn't like that, and he said it was a bit chalk and cheese, so I needed a bit more scope, so we included Woolstone as a 3rd, and he was quite happy with that. And again, we could do another one because of the computer, which allowed the data to be analysed so quickly and quite efficiently.
Most people would have been born locally, so I had to look to see whether the people were born in the county from the computer, and then I could see that about 87% were actually born in the county and 12% were not. So I could test it from that.
So could you have done that without the computer?
Well, it would have been possible, but it would have taken an awful long time. It would have taken sort of years to go through all these sort of censuses and things. So it definitely made it a lot easier using the computer. It still took me sort of quite a few hours actually looking up all the names, but it it would have been sort of almost impossible to do it for an individual study?
Well, the main problem if you don't have a computer is you have to count all the different results. You have to go through counting up all these 46 fields, and that's going to take a very long time. So I can get the computer to search through very quickly.
Did you process your study when you'd finished?
Yes.
And finally, any regrets?
I didn't regret using a computer. I regretted doing this project a few times, especially during the summer holidays, when I was spending a couple of hours every day just ploughing through census material, which is very difficult to read.
I mean, can you tell me how you introduce those students to using the computer for their individual studies?
Well, the answer to that question is the use of the computer comes indirectly. It doesn't come, if you like, in the forefront of the project. So the ideas have to come from the pupils themselves. We work on the idea, so we develop the particular theme. So if I take the example of the accidents, now the pattern of accidents had a lot of scope, but there are too many variables involved. Now you can limit the nature of that project by saying we'll choose 2 or 3 that you think are quite critical. Or you can open up the number of questions you can actually ask by saying we can deal with as many as 25 or even 30 variables. Now if you're going to do that effectively, you need some form of mechanical interpretation. So what we then do is go back to the pupil and say, okay, you can do it your way, but a better way to do it is to actually use a database. So the pupil then becomes interested, develops the database, and then begins to open up the kinds of questions they can actually ask. So it doesn't come from the point of view, look, we've got a database, let's use it, but rather the implications of the research often put pressure on the pupil to say, well, how are we going to manage that information? And the answer is, well, here's the way to do it. It's to use the computer.
Have there been any problems in organising their use of the computer?
I mean, there are always problems in organising the use of a computer, and that is you don't have enough machines, and you don't have the machines available when you want them. But with a degree of management and sharing and borrowing and using time outside of the classroom, you can overcome that. I mean, there are computers at school here that I can use after school. The history department have got a computer and I can borrow theirs in the lunchtime. There are all kinds of ways that we can actually do that. But yes, it is a question of management, and in any one year, not everybody who would say, I can use the computer, can actually do so. We have to say, well, this is perhaps a better way of using it, and we make those choices and say this child has more scope here, they've developed the idea, they will have access to it. Those are the kinds of problems that I think any teacher faces.
Do they need a great deal of help when they're using the computer?
Well, this time round they've needed quite a lot of help. The next time round, less so. And interestingly enough, the geography departments had quite a big role to play in the development of the curriculum extension. And because of the developments, for example, the TVI initiative, geography is now getting in and saying we need to develop certain kinds of skills throughout the whole of the curriculum, not just in geography. And we're now working on the principle that within 3 years, we are hoping that all children, by the time they get to the 4th year option, geography, will have experience of using databases, word processors, and so on. So the problem is gradually becoming less. We hope it's going to become less. And that's partly the initiative taken by the kind of research we've done at GCSE in geography. So it's quite interesting the knock-on effect that's had elsewhere. Yes, but it is a problem. You can't just say, here's a database. You have to learn how to use it, how to enter your information, how to withdraw information from it, and that, of course, can be very time-consuming. But if you go back to that film we made of the hypothesis testing, you notice you can soon find 2 or 3 people who cotton on very quickly, and you can actually begin to use them. So it's not directly teacher teaching the pupils, but other pupils doing it as well.
Some of them have put a lot of data into the computer, and that's been very time-consuming. Is that a major problem?
I can see what you're leading up to. It could be. It depends on how you manage it. I think it's the old story, isn't it? It's a question of once you've got that information, then you can do a lot more with it. And you have to play this game in a sense of deciding what is a reasonable amount of time to spend on putting information in. If you want to improve the quality of the research done at A-level in particular, then you're going to have to accept that the microcomputer is going to take up more time as an initial part of that project. But the results are going to be that much better because you're going to get more realistic answers to very complex questions. So I think you have to balance out the two. Yes, there are going to be increasing pressures to a degree, but perhaps the examination system needs to change to take into account those kinds of problems. I mean, GCSE has done so, and presumably A-level is going to adjust accordingly.